Welcome to the WagerTalk Podcast for the week ending January 14th. We've got another big show, guys. Our guy behind the counter, William Bernanke, is with us. He is from CG Analytics. He's going to take us behind the counter, let us know where the money's going on this week's 4 playoff games. And we're going to do a little season-ending house cleaning with him and find out how that Clemson-Alabama beating managed for the books. Dave, Ralph, and myself will break down all 4 games later in the podcast. And, of course, in the final segment, we'll give you each a best bet. Ralph brought a ton of stats with him this week for Handicappers Corner, so it is a jam-packed show. And, guys, I'm going to come right out of the gate tonight with a special offer for you guys. We appreciate you tuning in to the podcast each and every week. Ralph, Dave, and myself, we wouldn't be doing this if it wasn't for you guys, so we want to reward you. And we're going to reward you with a $10 off coupon. You can get anything at WagerTalk from Dave, Ralph, or myself this week through Sunday. You can use this coupon over and over again. POD10. That's POD10. $10 off. That is, you can take it off a single game package, 3-day package, or a 7 days or longer. Anything you want all weekend long. That coupon will be active through kickoff of the second game on Sunday.
Hey, Will, you still there? Marco said it was going to be a short intro. I just want to make sure you're still with us.
Yeah, didn't fall asleep
well,
yet.
you guys can blame Johnny. Johnny said he wants me to lead with the ad. I'm sorry. All right, Will. Hey, let's bring him in. He's our man behind the counter. Let's pull that curtain back. Take a look, Will. Hey, how did Alabama, Clemson, Part 4 fare for the books?
Clemson winning outright was a great result for us. I think I could say that. We would say with confidence that most books had the same thing. The game going over, we did lose a bit on it, but we did take a lot of under money. Day of game, that line came down, actually, day of game. So it wasn't a terrible hit, but the fact that Clemson won outright and by margin knocked out any Alabama money teasers and all that.
You know, one question Marco didn't ask, but was Clemson, did it help your liability with national championship futures? Were you one-sided with the Clemson or Alabama side?
No, actually, it was not even, but it was a little bit shaded to Alabama. So Clemson winning did help us with the futures, but nothing big or anything like that. Wouldn't have really made that much of a difference. The game itself was much bigger.
When we have a game like the national championship, what's the percentage between sides and totals? I mean, we know probably more money's bet on the sides than the totals, but between the money line on the sides and the over-unders and prop bets, any type of division you can give us just for Joe Public to have an idea of what the entire spectrum is for a game like this?
Well, it's a great question, and 95% of the money is traditional bets, straight bets, money line, over-under, that type of thing. And then the other 5%, you have the in-running and in props. I lumped that all into one there. So that's about the breakdown, especially for a game like big game like this.
I'm surprised. Well, if you had asked me to put up an over/under for me, I would have never thought that the in-game still is only resulting in 5% of the total handle. I would expect that to, obviously it's going to continue to grow as we get more and more people involved in app betting, obviously. But, when you're sitting there in that game and you talked with the first question saying that the over wasn't a good decision for you, but I got to guess that as in-game running was going on and everybody was just pouring in when they saw that first quarter, the way that they were scoring points, the in-game people continuing to take the overs. I don't think there was a click after you guys got to the 60s on the over-under where anybody would have had, betting an over would have cashed.
Yeah, that's definitely the case. Once it kind of hit a wall, so to speak, with everything possible to prevent some scoring, especially from Bama, after the first quarter. But to get into back to that with the in-running, a game like this you wouldn't see as much in relative to the total handle because a lot of the bets are coming from books on the strip where bettors are from out of town that don't have the app, where ordinarily another game, a regular game, where you have the handle might be a little lower, but you'll have more app bettors, and that's when you'll see that handle go up a little bit on the in-running.
Shifting to the NFL, how did the wild card weekend go for the house?
Pretty well, actually. Our wins were bigger than our losses. It's simply said. Just go game by game. Colts and Houston, that was a great result with the Colts winning outright and never really being threatened there. Seattle, Dallas was a small loss with the Seahawks getting that incredible late cover there, depending on what line people got. But certainly most of the Seahawks bettors at least got a push, at the very least there, with that late 2-point play. Chargers was the worst result of the weekend. Chargers winning outright, but we recouped some in the second half. Actually, second half wagering there because some bettors were still on them, and then the Ravens came back to cover the second half, as you know. And then the biggest winner was the Eagles winning outright. All the Bears money line plays were wiped out with that missed field goal, and that was our biggest liability, actually.
Do you, as the weekend progresses, is the last game the highest volume game for you?
Yeah, it happened to be Philly-Chicago by a small margin, but that's standard, especially wild card weekend. I expect this weekend to be. Let me see here. Yeah, the Philly-New Orleans game. It's just it's another high-profile game, so it's falling right in that regard.
As we head into this week's games, Will, everybody knows about the domination of the Dogs going back to the start of the playoffs last year, and we saw it again this weekend in the opening round. When you guys are setting the numbers now, and when you know that there's been such, and again, it's a small sample size, but you know the public is what they see right now. What have you done for me lately? And they know these dogs are barking loud. How does it affect you guys when you're putting the numbers up, like these games where you've got this, for an example, Dallas and the Rams? Would you guys have hung the hook on this game more readily if you hadn't had all of these dogs? And does that put you on shading it a little bit and let the market take over?
Well, yeah, Marco, you'd think that'd be the case. But really, no big adjustments were made because we still get that favorite money, whether it's parlay, teaser, or straight money. And, that old human tendency for bettors to just take favorites and overs. In the bye week, a lot of bettors love that reassurance of a well-rested team versus a team that maybe comes in beat up. So we're still getting favorite money and nothing significant as far as any adjustments.
Well, if we can break down each of the four games starting on Saturday, Indy and Kansas City, my first question is this. With the playoffs and with these teams now off a bye, is there public money earlier than usual? And tell us about, I know, again, Dave Cokin and I talked to Jason earlier on the Las Vegas Sports line. So I know this Kansas City line actually moved to 6. Was that some public money coming in, or was that your sharps jumping on the Chiefs?
No, it's nothing, not sharp money, just some public money there on the Chiefs. What's interesting about this game is the ticket count and the discrepancy in dollars here. The ticket count's 2-1 in favor of the Colts, but the dollars are 78% in the Chiefs. Now, you'd think we have seen respected money on both sides with a mid-5-figure bet on the Chiefs. But it's nothing to the point of where you'd really say we got to move this line tremendously here to get Colts money, because we're going to get Colts money. But right now, it looks like we're going to need the Colts. It's a confusing game, actually.
Moving to the second game, Will, you've got Dallas traveling to play the Rams. Dallas, we joke about, they used to be America's team. When they're winning, everybody loves them. Now they're playing a Rams team that for almost the entire season was the team to beat. The Saints beat them in that head-to-head matchup and to secure the home field advantage. And then we saw that Sunday night game where the Rams went into Chicago and basically got punched right in the face by that Bears defense. And then they didn't look quite the same team down the stretch. But here we are. They're opening up a 7-point favorite at home. Haven't seen a lot of movement around town on any of the books on this one. How's the money coming for you guys? And I know you don't want to hear this question, but I know this has to be one of the two most popular teased games on the board.
Yeah, well, the ticket count's fairly even, but we're seeing a lot of teasers on the Rams. They're teasing them down there from the 7, which is a good teaser number, and 70% of the dollars, though, are on the Rams. So it looks like we're going to need, actually on Saturday right now, it looks like we're going to need both dogs, surprisingly. So we're seeing the Rams money come in, teasers, straight bets, and some money line plays.
Moving to Sunday, you know, some people say the LA Chargers are the AFC's best team. They're going to New England. They're you know, the Patriots are probably giving a little more than their normal home edge, maybe because of the bye week, maybe because it's Belichick against Lynn. You know, who knows? It's probably the biggest mismatch there is. Tell us, I mean, do people believe the Chargers can get over the hump and win this?
Yeah, bettors are all over the Chargers here. This is our most trendy underdog of the week, so to say. Ticket count 64% on the Chargers. Dollars are very lopsided on them as well, 85% on the Chargers. So looks like we're going to need the Patriots, which is certainly not a bad proposition with Belichick's stats with, off a bye week and certainly their history. And the Chargers, second straight trip back to the East Coast here at an early time doesn't bode well for them, but you never know. But certainly looks like we're going to need New England, and I wouldn't be surprised this line gets in the 3.5, dips to that range.
Will, are you seeing both sharps and the public on the Chargers in this one?
Yeah, a slight, not a lot of sharp money, but we've seen some hints of it early in the week. So it hasn't shown up because the number, it was so, it was like 4.5, 5 earlier. So that it came off that so quickly that they haven't kind of tipped their hand here late.
With the final game, Will, and this is the other one that's going to get just a ton of teaser action with the Saints. There's nothing you can do. And I got to be honest, when I saw this number of 8, I says, it's 8. Why have they got it at 8? You know that the teasers are going to come. Just go ahead and put it to 9. Get that teaser blocker number out there. But nobody did it. I mean, I think I saw a couple rogue 9s for a little bit, as teaser protection. But this thing's sitting there. Are you getting money on Philadelphia that everybody is not protecting on a teaser? Because I just can't see anything but teasing the Saints down.
No, nothing crazy on Philly. In fact, it's slightly leaning towards the Saints. It's about 60% on the Saints. Ticket count, and the dollars are 63% on the Saints right now. So, again, we may need the dog anyway. And as far as, nothing to the point where it moved the line very much. So that's why we're not seeing, we got great two-way action, put it that way. So we don't really need to move the number as far as teasers go. It's been majority Saints, of course, teasers here. But it looks like, again, we're going to need the dog in this game unless we see something, crazy happen before kickoff.
Well, of the 8 teams left, are any of them a liability to you in future bets to win the Super Bowl? And the second part of my question is there potential for you to have liability once the playoff odds started? Or are your future liabilities for the Super Bowl basically all of those bigger odds at the start of the season?
Oh, definitely the bigger odds to the start of the season, or even, quarter or halfway through when a team is, you have some bettors that grab a team at its peak, let's say. But as far as what we see in the playoffs, there's nothing compared to what you see, at preseason time or we're around week 1. And as far as our biggest liability, right now it looks like Dallas slightly is our biggest liability. Least is actually the Patriots, but nothing that stands out. It's just a slight liability with Dallas there.
Yeah, you heard Ralph kind of snicker when you had really no liability with New England. You wouldn't think that because every year we put them right into the Super Bowl. But the odds are so small on them, and the public doesn't want to tie. When you look at John Q. Public betting, he's not going to tie up his money for
6 months for 3-1 odds.
Yeah. And the pros are never going to take a short favorite on a future. So that's why, to explain why you don't get the money on the obvious play was to have New England for the Super Bowl. So,
sure. Hey,
Will, hanging around with you, I'm learning a few things. I'm getting a little smarter, buddy. I appreciate it.
That's the idea. And I am as well from you guys.
Hey, Will, as always, man, great stuff. Good luck on all the games this weekend for the house, except the ones that I have. Sorry, I can't root for you on those ones, but sure. Good luck, and we'll have you, if your schedule permits, we'll have have you back next week for the conference championship games and see if we have any crazy finishes this week. The double doink last week. What a way to end the weekend, though. I mean, that was the perfect ending to this. For the first weekend. Just go doink doink. Adios, guys. Out of the playoffs. See you next week.
Absolutely. You always see something you never have, and you never know what it's going to be this week, but I'm sure we'll be talking about it same time on Thursday.
Hey,
Will, always a pleasure. Thanks, bud.
Thanks, buddy. Take care. We're going to step out for a quick break. When we come back, it is Handicappers Corner here on the WagerTalk Podcast.
Every Tuesday, WagerTalk.com offers a best bet selection from its hottest handicapper. It's a great way to introduce yourself to WagerTalk.com with a big best bet winner for just $2 on $2 Tuesday.
Welcome back to the WagerTalk Podcast. It is time for another edition of Handicappers Corner. And our guru of the numbers, Ralph Michaels. Ralph, we're going to look at NFL playoffs. You've got stuff on all 4 games here. Tell us a little bit, though. We always tell everybody, don't go gospel just because of a trend. A trend can be your friend, but in the end, it can hurt you too.
Yeah, we're gonna go through just some random trends. We're not trying to slant aside. There's a couple where there may be 3 for one team, only 1 for the other. These are just interesting numbers that have had a high win percentage just to pique your interest. Have some fun with these. But again, by no means are we ever basing a play just on a trend or angle. As you said, sort of queerly, like a trend can be your friend, but I'll just sort of, ignore that part of it. But, if it's part of your handicapping repertoire or what you're building to make a play better, absolutely it can be part of that. But again, I don't base my plays on these. I don't even use them that much in the NFL. But again, they're fun for our listeners. They're fun to talk about. They're fun to share tomorrow morning when, I'm going to just start it off with the Indianapolis Colts and Kansas City. And this is a game where I do lean with the under. So, looking at these two situations, it has me looking towards the under, and I can agree with them. The Colts right now are 2-11 over-under as a dog. So in their last 13 games, we know their defense has played well, and we know that, they become a little conservative. Also, the Chiefs, again, they're a little different this year with Mahomes at quarterback, but they still have played unders down the stretch. The Chiefs are 11-34-4 over-under as a home favorite. Again, 11-34-4 as a home favorite.
Yeah, here's another one in this game, Ralph. If you like the underdog, you're going to like this stat. Kansas City is just 1-12 against the spread as a favorite when they're coming off a win as a favorite in which they had over 300 yards passing. That sets them up in this one to be a fade to take Indianapolis.
And that has occurred the last few games this year. Yeah. I mean, Mahomes is throwing for 300 yards, but they still haven't covered as a favorite down the stretch. So, we'll talk about KC a little more. We'll mention KC has lost 6 straight playoff games at home, and they've lost 8 straight against the spread. And the Chiefs, who started the season 8-1 against the spread, have only gone 1-5-1 down the stretch.
Going to the second game, you've got the Cowboys and the Rams. I'll throw a stat out here for you that when you sent these over to me and I looked at this one, I said, wow. In the division round, which is where we're at, teams that allowed 30 points to a division foe are 2-14 against the spread since 2007. Rams allowed 32 points in their final game against their division foe, the San Francisco 49ers. What do you think of that? That's a pretty big stat there, 2-14.
Yeah, again, the problem with that stat is, and I'm going to point out the problem is, sometimes in the division round, You may have been playing a team in game number 16 where it meant something. Sometimes you may have been playing a foe where it didn't mean anything. Well, it didn't mean anything to the Rams defense. They didn't play their starters. They didn't have that same game plan. So, again, it's a stat to talk about. It's a nice number. But, again, you have to take it with a grain of salt. I'm going to mention two stats, which combined are a 19-0 on the Dallas Cowboys. If you're a Cowboys backer, here's two numbers to think about. Well, the Dallas Cowboys are now 10-0 after a win in which they trailed after three quarters. Last week against Seattle, going to the fourth quarter, it was 14-10 the Seahawks led. The Cowboys came back. And again, the last 10 times the Cowboys had a fourth quarter comeback, they covered. Another Dallas trend is they're 9-0 as an away dog after a game where they had 34 minutes plus time of possession. So they obviously ran the ball. They had a time of possession edge, and now they're a dog getting points. So two Dallas angles combined 19-0. But, Marco, why don't you tell us a Rams angle that'll say, this is a Rams angle that sounds good.
As Lee Corso would say, not so fast, my friend. We got the Rams 12-1 against the spread at home, off a home win of 4 or more points. And obviously that win was that final game against San Francisco. They gave up 32 points, but they scored a gazillion themselves, so they had an easy win. So, again, trends can go both ways. They're fun to talk about, like you say, and point out different sides. And sometimes you can take a trend and even break the trend down and say, okay, you know what, this kind of makes a little more sense of an angle. I like, just not in any of these games, but I love their stats like, Team X is 15-1 when they run for 150 yards or more. Well, no kidding, because they're winning the game and they're feeding the running back. Some of those stats, are self-explanatory, or a team's bad when they're throwing the football 50 times or more. Well, they're probably behind because they had to throw that many times.
One last stat just on that Cowboys-Rams game is, we often talk about the Chargers not having a home edge in L.A. Well, the Rams are playing in a cavernous stadium. They can't wait to go play in their new state-of-the-art stadium in a couple years. But Jared Goff is now 6-12 ATS at home, and he's 2-10 ATS at home against teams with a 400 win percentage or higher. So basically, if he's playing a winning team, he's only winning 25% of his games. He did that against Atlanta, but will he have learned from that and now put it on this week? So we'll see.
Well, we're going to the Chargers at Patriots next, and if we're talking playoffs and we're talking Patriots, we're talking Belichick, we're talking Brady, you got to have a bunch of angles that say how good they are. We already know it, but go ahead and tell us some angles on New England.
Well, we actually don't have any for the Chargers, except they've won 9 straight games out of L.A. It doesn't mean there aren't any 4-0, 5-0, but I just didn't write those down. We've got 2. I'm going to talk about one Brady specific. You're going to talk about one for the Patriots total. But Brady is simply this. In the division round playoff game at home, we'll talk about it later. They've played 9 straight games in this division round. I was going to say, when was the
last time that they were on the road in the first playoff game?
They've won those last 7, but Brady is 11-1 straight up, 7-4-1 in division round playoff games at home. So is that surprising? Well, no, not really, because we know what the success they've had. But, tell us about a total one that has a pretty high number here, Marco.
Yeah, New England is 20-1 to the over when they're a favorite after a win by 7 points or more, and facing a team that was held in their last for under 250 yards.
So that opponent, the opponent they're playing now, San Diego, held their last opponent to 250 yards. Yep, sorry. The LA/San Diego Chargers held Baltimore to under 250 yards. So you would think if a team played that good defense, wouldn't they play that good defense again? But when you're playing Brady and they're off a win by 7 or more, it's actually 20-1 to the over. So
I'm leaning to the over in that game.
Is that because maybe the line is adjusted because the defense held their last opponent to such a good number that people think they can hold Brady to that number again? I don't know what the answer is, but again, it's one of those just to think about.
Well, I'll tell you, to break it down, you try to find angles and why things make sense. If that team had such a good game defensively the week before, it's playing defense takes more energy than playing offense. And, you're physical, you're hitting. It's hard to duplicate that 2 weeks in a row. And let's face it, they're coming off one of the most physical, defenses in the league for the Chargers last week. They faced Baltimore, going to bang them up a little bit. Good defense, low-scoring game. They didn't have to worry about their defense because Lamar Jackson didn't do anything offensively. I think you're going to see some points this week from both teams. Might have to add the old over to my card on that one.
Jumping back a couple games, this isn't one that I had on the sheet to talk about, but I know this just off the top of my head. Over the last 6 years, teams are only 40% the week after playing the Seattle Seahawks. Well, you had the Legion of Boom. You had that very physical defense. Dallas is off a Seattle team. Yes, the defense has changed a little bit, but now you're talking about a team off the Baltimore game, another physical defense. Well, Marco, Philadelphia is traveling to New Orleans, and, you gave us a great total stat on the Chargers-Patriots. Give us another total stat on on New Orleans and Philadelphia.
Well, this is one of those ones that's 15-0. And my buddy that's in the business that's at WagerTalk as well, we used to always joke when we came up with a good angle, and then we jumped on that side, and it was 15-0 going in. And if it fell when we jumped on it, we'd text each other, well, 15-1 ain't bad. But here's a 15-0 for you, and that is the Eagles are 15-0 to the over off a game as an underdog playing a team they lost to earlier in the season. And boy, did they lose earlier in the season to this one, 48-7.
Again, I'm going to probably none of those 15 were playoff games. Yeah. They were them playing a division foe playing again. Mm-hmm. I mean, it translates in when you read it. But again, a playoff game's a different scenario. Obviously, they were a dog last week against Chicago and won. So, again, while we're talking a 15-0 angle, the circumstances are quite a bit different. I want to mention another one for Philadelphia. And you talked about playing a same team again. Well, the Philadelphia Eagles are 12-0 against the spread as an away dog of 4 or more points, seeking same-season revenge. I'm sure all of those games, at least 11 of the 12, were playing division foes. Mm-hmm. Again, the second time in the season. It does work in this situation. But again, we're having fun talking about these angles. Marco, tell us about number one seeds.
Number one seeds are 18.
NFC number one seeds. My apologies.
NFC number one seeds are 18-9 against the spread in the divisional round, and 13-4 against the spread versus a foe off of an underdog win. And obviously Philly coming off that big underdog win in Chicago, now heading down to play the number one seed.
So again, you have the best team in the NFC, just 18-9 against the spread in this round the last 27 years. That's pretty positive there. Then you add in getting a team that was off an upset, which probably means they were on the road again.
Right.
And you have a very solid subset of that of 13-4. Of all of these, that's my favorite because, number one, it's specific to the playoffs. And number two, to me, it makes so much sense. So it may not be a 15-0 angle, but if you are a Saints fan, I like that one the most. And the final one we're just going to give you is simple. It's going to go opposite what you just said. And again, we're just having fun here tonight. Super Bowl champs are 8-2-1 against the spread as a dog off an underdog win. So how many Super Bowls do we have to go back to find out the next year, the next time they played, that they were a dog and they were off an underdog win? Right. So again, those situations are really spread out. It doesn't really translate into specific on the team. Hey, but great cooler talk tomorrow morning when you're at the office.
Sounds good, Ralph. Appreciate each and every week you finding all of these good stats for us to break down and use. We're going to take a break. When we come back, we're going to throw the stats and trends aside for the moment, and we're going to actually dig down deep, break down all 4 NFL playoff games. That's up next with Dave, Ralph, and myself here on the WagerTalk Podcast.
It's Manic Monday, and that means every pick at WagerTalk.com is just $9. Get a play in any sport valued at up to $30 for just $9 each and every Monday at WagerTalk.com.
Welcome back to the WagerTalk Podcast. Before we get into the NFL playoff games this week, I want to tell you this segment is brought to you by uwager.eu. Get a 50% sign-up bonus whenever you use promo code WT50. That's WT50. Get 50% sign-up bonus. All right, guys, we're going to jump into the playoffs. It's the second round of the playoffs. Some good games last week. Dogs, once again, Dave, barked loud last week. This is 2 years now in the NFL playoffs that the Dogs have been just insane. What, one loss against the spread?
12-1-1-8, yes.
It'll turn, though. That's, things run in cycles, and it could be this weekend. Well, who knows?
You got some good setups. We got some teams that on paper look like very live dogs. We talked about entering the playoffs this year. The number 5 and number 6 seed, Chargers and Colts, might be the 2 best 5-6 combinations that we have had in the playoffs in a long time. And we'll start off with one of them. Dave, Indianapolis goes to KC. We saw Indianapolis last week. They looked fantastic against Houston. Yep. Andrew Luck continues his winning ways. What a transformation. This team, the way they started. We were questioning Andrew Luck, how effective he was going to be this year, but man, he has really turned it on over the last 3 quarters of the season. Goes into KC. Stat last week, one other angle. First-time starters in the playoffs for quarterbacks. 0-3 last week. We got Patrick Mahomes this week, but a little different scenario.
Yeah, I'd say it is. The market is interesting on this game because this is a public dog. It is not yet something that would fall into the pros versus Joes, but it's kind of heading that way because we talked with Jason Stimble on the radio show on Thursday, and looks like the more respected money is now starting to show on Kansas City. Apparently, maybe the belief is that it got as low as it was going to get, and they've taken some serious action on the Chiefs. Now, again, that's just information stuff. Doesn't mean the Chiefs are going to win. Doesn't mean the Colts are going to lose. The fascinating part of this game is the matchup itself, because the Indianapolis defense has turned out to be, I think it's fair to say, the biggest surprise unit in the NFL this season. This was supposed to be a bad defense, really bad. I'm talking about one of the worst in the league.
And Dave, where did you have him to start the year?
I had him 32nd, dead last. I had him as the worst defense in the league on my ratings. Got that one wrong. The Chiefs are the team with no defense, but the Chiefs have an amazing offense that nobody's really been able to contain, especially at Kauffman, or at Arrowhead, I should say, at Kauffman Stadium. They could probably contain him because they don't play football there. Right city, anyway. You can tell I'm getting ready for baseball season. Yeah. I find it a tough game to handicap, but my number, for what it's worth, was 6. So it's gotten to where my number was to begin with. And you know what that means I don't force plays.
Right.
So it's like, you want an opinion that's bettable on the Colts Kansas City game. It's not coming from me.
All right, go to you, Ralph. You look at this one. The Colts 10-1 their last 11 games. Last 6 games, only one team has topped 21 points against them. Talking about how good that defense has been. Kansas City's had an extra week to prepare. We know how good Andy Reid historically has been off of a bye week, but we also know historically how bad the Chiefs have been in the playoffs. I think they currently own the longest losing streak at home in the playoffs at like 6 in a row.
6 straight, yeah.
And everybody remembers last year's game. Big lead at halftime, and oh boy, did they have a collapse in the second half against Tennessee. How do you see this one, Ralph?
Andy Reid is 1-7 straight up his last 8. And the Chiefs, by the way, are on an 0-8 ATS run in the playoffs at home. The one thing I look at is we're all excited about the Chiefs start, but I don't think enough has been made of Kareem Hunt not being on the team. The offense is a lot different down the stretch, and I just think they're not getting the margin they did. It's a different offense if you don't have to worry about the play-action pass, worry about a guy who had 1,700 yards last year, both rushing and receiving. The thing, the thing that does concern me is we forget that we look back at last year, but this year and teams that have the higher seed and have the rest have historically done very well. This used to be blowout week. Mm-hmm. And, you have the Colts traveling for the third straight week. So I do lean with the Colts, but that travel situation, the Colts schedule is one of the weakest they've been. So while we can talk all the numbers we want, you look at who they've played and you look at top 10 offenses they faced, they're few and far in between. So to me, that does concern me playing this level of competition on the road.
For me, guys, I'm going to go not on the game, but on the total. And I look at this one. Last week, I was on the under in the Indianapolis-Houston one. And the reason I was on the under in that one was those were two division foes. They know each other well. They obviously play twice a year. That was the third meeting last week. It's easier to take away a team's strength whenever you play them. You know how to defend them. This is a different animal this week. They don't play these two teams on a normal basis. And I think Indianapolis is going to have success, as every other offense has had success against this Kansas City defense. But on the flip side, as good as we've praised Indianapolis and their defense and how well, surprisingly, they've played this year, I agree with you. They've played a weak schedule. They haven't faced those explosive offenses. And again, last week, Houston was a team that was scoring points. But as we said, that was a quarterback making his first start in the playoffs. Oh, wait, we got another quarterback making his first start. But Patrick Mahomes wasn't a rookie. This kid is mature beyond his years. We haven't seen anything like him. Nobody has stopped him, and I don't think that the Colts are going to be able to stop him either. I think we get a lot of points in this game. I think we're getting a little bit of line value based on last week's low-scoring game. With that said, I'm all over the over in this one.
Yeah, again, you got to just remember the Colts division, they played 6 games against Houston, Tennessee, and Jacksonville. None of those offenses are going to scare you.
All right, good stuff, guys, on the first one. Let's move into the second game on Saturday. An interesting one because public perception right now is more to the dog because they have played well. We talked about how well
they're also an extremely popular franchise when they're good.
Absolutely. One time are they still America's team, or did we give them back?
That could be the Patriots now.
Yeah, okay.
I don't know. When the Cowboys are good, they arguably have the best fan base in the country when they're good.
I can't disagree with it. I would say that the Steelers might have as good of when teams travel, as far as teams that travel. Dallas.
Well, there's a few of them. The Bears. Listen, the Bears when they're good.
Yeah.
But
Dallas,
the Cowboys,
Green Bay, Pittsburgh.
You got to see it
for sure.
You got to see it on display in this game because what is it going to be? Half the house could be Cowboys fans.
I think it might be more. Yeah. There's a good chance it could be more than half the house. The Rams on the flip side, guys. This is a team that they were motoring all year long. They ran into that buzzsaw in Chicago. They had the showdown game against two big showdown games this year. They had the one against the Saints,
which was an incredible game,
and the one against the Chiefs. The Monday night game was just absolutely.
Which was also an incredible game.
Yeah, I like the Monday night game because they were getting blown out in the Saints game,
and then they made a great comeback, and from that point on,
it was a game.
Who knew? The one thing you can argue on the Rams is that they have not been quite the same team since the Cooper Kupp injury. So this is, in a sense, the battle of the Coopers. The Cooper that's playing for the Dallas Cowboys, who has completely transformed their offense.
Dave, I like that. Yeah.
And the Cooper that's not playing, Cooper Kupp for the Rams, who unfortunately has somewhat transformed their offense as well. Yeah. I still think the Rams win the game.
Yeah, you go to Ralph. You look at the Rams. down the stretch after the Chicago game, in which Chicago they punched them right in the face. I mean, that was a physical game. They stopped that offense cold in its tracks. And then the very next week, they played Philadelphia, where Philadelphia's without Carson Wentz. Everybody expected the blowout. If you remember, that line opened at 9.5, closed at 13.5 in that game. 4-point swing. They didn't even not only not cover, they lost that game, and they were getting beat from pillar to post. They were never in that game. They were playing catch-up the whole time. Can they hit the reset button? Because let's not get too excited about their last 2 wins. It was teams that had nothing to play for, and they beat up also Rams. Now they're playing a red-hot Cowboys club.
Well, blowing out Arizona and San Francisco maybe also Rams, but it also helps a team get very healthy, not having to play a whole game, now having played those 2 also-rans, having blown them out, and having a bye week. What's concerning for me, though, with the Rams is they were 0-5-2 down the stretch against winning teams, ATS. They just haven't had the same team. I mean, to have this team and think of the defensive line that we saw the first 6 or 8 weeks, that everyone just anointed the Rams the best team in football, that D-line is now allowed over 5.1 yards per carry. I think it's a game where the Rams benefit from having played Atlanta last year and losing at home. Goff has experience at home. They have that feeling of what a home loss does to them. I think that of all the quarterbacks, especially those on the road, the least I'd want to have is Dak Prescott. I think that means if you're the Cowboys, you're going to run the ball. You're still going to try to throw deep a few times to stretch the field to AC. But I look at both teams putting their running backs in the spotlight, both teams running the ball, and I look for a lower scoring game. I think the total's inflated by 1.5 or 2 points.
You look at this one, if you do the matchups in this one, the strength of the Cowboys, they're going to want, as you said, establish a running game with Ezekiel Elliott.
Yeah, and that keeps the other team's offense off the field, too.
Absolutely. And they're going against the 28th ranked rushing defense. So you've got the strength versus the weakness here. Which one's going to prevail? I'll be honest with you, whenever I did Gil's podcast this week, we broke down all 4 of these games. This is the one that I felt was I had my weakest vote as far as the game went itself, because I honestly can make a solid case for both sides in this game. However, where I think the real value is in this game is teasing the Rams down. I don't see the Rams losing this game, especially after learning their lesson last year where they lost the game. And if you saw it, they still played. Todd Gurley didn't play in the final, but they did play some of the other players. Unlike last year, in the season final, I think they wanted to keep that momentum moving a little bit this year, because last year it bit them in the ass. There's no way.
I think they wanted Goff to get a good game under his belt, too, and he did.
Absolutely. So for me, I think the value is in the teaser and get this down where you're just picking the Rams to win the game, and I'll be hooking the Rams up with some stuff. All right, that's the 2 Saturday games. Let's head to Sunday, and we got a game in Foxborough. And anytime we got a game in Foxborough, sorry, Ralph, until the Browns get into the playoffs, we don't open with you on a playoff game like this one. But this is yours, Dave. This is Foxborough and your New England Patriots.
Well, not mine. I couldn't care less about it. No, really. I mean,
as he's sitting in here doing the podcast with the Red Sox.
Yeah. Oh, Red Sox. I am a Red Sox fan. I really don't care much about, I'm more of a Golden Knights fan than a Bruins fan. I've never really cared one way or the other about the NBA. And honestly, I've been betting for too long and then booking before that to really give a rat's ass about who wins in the NFL. It's all about the money, okay? The NFL is, because the NFL is a betting sport, okay? So I couldn't care less about that stuff. And I actually, if I did, I'd probably root against the Patriots, because that was one of the worst experiences I've ever had, is sitting at a Patriots game against whoever they played. I think it was Buffalo. It's the last NFL game I attended. It was back in the 70s, and it was colder than a witch's tit. It was brutal. It was snowing. It was windy. It was thoroughly unpleasant, and it's like this would have been a lot more fun from home.
And you would know about a witch's tit. I mean, you were back in the 1800s, weren't you?
I was at the 1600s.
He was ruling the Salem witch hunts.
Yeah.
Is that
so as far as this goes, okay, so the Chargers are as good as the Patriots. They are. You can argue they might even be better than the Patriots, man for man. But you still saw, and I know they got through at Baltimore last week, but boy, I mean, the Chargers, they find ways to not win games sometimes, and they almost did it again last week. They should have had a bigger early lead than they did. Mm-hmm. I mean, they're settling for field goals, so it's 9-0. The other team's not out of the game when it's 9-0. And then they catch breaks in the second half when Harbaugh, I don't know why, it's 4th and 1 at the 33-yard line, and he tries a 50-yard field goal, down 9. What are you doing? Right. You're a running team. Run the friggin' football. Get a first down. Maybe they end up settling for a field goal anyway. But you got to go for it.
At least it would have been a more makeable field goal.
Well, and then they missed the field goal on top of that. And then Baltimore came charging back late. Yeah, that's the worry I have, is that the Chargers are going to find a way to screw this up. And if you make the mistakes the Chargers made last week in terms of not getting the most bang for their buck in terms of the drives that they had in coming away with field goals, if you make those mistakes against the Patriots, you're not going to win the football game. Because Belichick and Brady will find a way to take advantage of that. You have to take advantage of every opportunity you have against the Patriots. And I don't know if they're equipped to do it. So it's a quandary for me, because on paper, I'm looking at this and saying, well, the Chargers, at anything more than a field goal, are the right side in terms of value. But I just don't trust that football team. I don't care about the travel 2 weeks in a row. That stuff doesn't bother me. They're not flying commercial, okay? They're not standing in line at Southwest and waiting for their zone to get called. I mean, they'll be fine as far as that goes. But they're still the Chargers to me until they prove that they can win a game like this and not do what they did last week, Ralph, because they almost blew that game last week.
Yeah, well, it's one thing going on the road and playing a rookie quarterback. It's another thing going on the road and playing Tom Brady.
Yeah.
And, the two numbers that have been everyone's talked about all week long is, Brady 7-0, 6-1 against Russell Wilson, and the Chargers are 9-0 outside of L.A. They've won every game outside of L.A.
Against
Phillip Rivers.
Phillip Rivers.
Yeah, we don't care what his numbers are against Russell Wilson.
No, I don't know where that came from.
He just wanted to make me remember that Seattle covered last week and cost me a lot of money.
Normally, when I'm brain dead, I would say Dan Fouts, and at least put the right quarterback with the team. But to name a totally wrong quarterback. But listen, you have New England, has had a first-round bye for 9 straight years. Well, they have won those last 7 games by 17 points per game. You have a team that, in the last 2 years, has only lost 1 home game. That was the opener against Kansas City in the regular season. You have a team that knows how to play in this situation, is rested, finally has all these pieces. We went a lot of the season without Gronk. We went a lot of the season without Edelman. I just think if I have Brady and Belichick off a bye with laying under a touchdown, that's the only way I can go. Either I will pass this game, or the more and more radio shows I do and podcasts, I'm talking myself more and more into the Patriots. We'll see what happens at the end of the week. But for me, it's the Patriots or pass.
All right, well, I'll be the voice of the other side here. The one thing that you didn't mention, and it finally got to, you got Edelman back. You got Gronk. Gronk's not 100%, guys. Okay,
I don't think he ever will be again. I think Gronk is nearing the end.
I think this might be it after this year. But the loss of Josh Gordon is huge to this offense. And I know he came in the middle of the season and everything else, but he had developed into the go-to.
He was that big receiver.
Yeah, he was spreading the field, and Brady hasn't had that all season. And, it was making, it changes the offense because it opens up the running game whenever he's taken. We talked about this same factor with Amari Cooper, how it changed the offense for the Cowboys. And I think Josh Gordon did that for Brady, and now they don't have him again. I think that's going to be a big loss for them that's, people aren't making enough of. And, guys, let's be realistic. I know last week the Chargers just did enough to get by. That game played itself into that ugly type of game because the Chargers were dominating, going up and down the field at the beginning of the game.
They should have been way ahead.
Against what was, one of the premier defenses in the league. They weren't punching it in, but it wasn't coming back to bite them in the ass because Baltimore had no yards in the first half.
3 first downs going into the fourth quarter.
Right. Lamar Jackson, just a horrible first 3 quarters in that game, and then he got some garbage yards late. That's not going to be the case this week. This Patriots defense is not as good as Baltimore's. And I think they're going to score, and I think they're going to continue to score because they know they have to. Last week, as you're watching that game, first one to 14 points was going to, looked like was going to win that game because it looked like no way Baltimore was going to put 2 touchdowns up. But this week they will. How about last year's game? These two met, and the Chargers almost beat the Patriots in Foxborough. 21-13 was the game.
I lost that game. I had the Chargers plus the points. And
they did everything
typical Chargers because they found a way to lose. And also there was a bad call that went against them that took a touchdown off the board, and it was a bad call. And so that typical Chargers.
So for me, and I look at last year's Charger team, and I look at this year's Charger team, way better than last year's, top to bottom.
Yeah.
We all agree on that. And I just feel there is a big drop-off from this year's Patriots team to last year's Patriots.
I agree with everything you said. The only thing that I'm arguing with you
is the history.
If you want to call it that, is the Chargers still have to convince me they can actually win one of these games that they're supposed to win. I don't know if they can.
You know what? We talked about Gronk coming back, but even as important or more important is the difference Joey Bosa has made since coming back the last quarter of the season.
Dominating player.
Yeah, I mean, he has changed that defense because he is a double-team player that changes the entire complexion of the Charger stop unit.
I think we'll know early.
In-game.
If the Patriots get out in front, the Chargers are in trouble. Would you agree with that?
I would agree with that, with Rivers having to come from behind, forcing, if he forces
That's when
the
he
issue.
makes mistakes.
I agree with you 100% on that. But we do have, last stat I'll throw in here before we move on to the next one. Chargers have the number 7 defense. New England has the number 16 defense. Chargers have the number 5 offense at 6.4 yards per play. New England's at 13. I've got better defense, better offense, and I'm getting points. But the X factor is Belichick and Brady, and I know that that's a big X factor because if the last 3 years, if all you did was blindly bet the New England Patriots at home, you're 20-8 against the spread.
Marco, I want one quick rebuttal to your stat numbers, and that is this. There is no bigger home-road dichotomy in the NFL than the Patriots at home and on the road. No. They were plus 111 yards per game at home. They were minus 43 yards per game on the road, 4 yards per game difference. So while the stats are full season, we do have the Patriots at home where they have been a much different team.
They were, and I will rebuttal your rebuttal with, remember, 3 of those 8 games get to be the Jets, the Bills, and Miami.
That's why they've been a number 1 seed for this many years, no question.
Chargers plus the points for me, guys. Moving on to the last one, Philadelphia at the Saints. I am not even going to talk to Dave on this one because Dave has been on an incredible run. He doesn't have many 5% plays in the NFL, but he's got one in this game. So we're going to let Dave just take the code of silence in this one. If you want to get Dave's 5% play, head over to WagerTalk and check it out. And
Prez put a 50% off code on that today, which is Cokin 15.
Nice.
Which means you get it for half price, which is $15. Now, I don't. That might be today only. I'm not sure.
Okay, well, guys, jump on that. Cokin 15. Get that for half price. I'll be out in the parking lot tomorrow, giving it for $7.50. Then check that out.
Which parking lot?
Just DM me. I'll tell you.
Marco usually hangs outside the Venetian when he gets enough poker money. Then he goes inside. And plays.
You got to get my steak. You roll me up, baby. Head me to Vegas.
You have a new mouth to feed in the house.
I do. We have the little puppy we got over Christmas, and he has already taken over the house. Let me tell you, he lays right on the remote.
Nice.
I want to change the channel. He said, "No, you're not. We're watching this." All right, Ralph, you got Philadelphia going to the Saints. This is, every year in the playoffs, you're going to get a game where the two have already met during the regular season. It's not that often, though, guys, that you get a second meeting when the first meeting was 48-7. Because generally, if somebody got beat 48-7, there's not a good chance that they're probably in the playoffs for the rematch. But here we have them, St. Nick to the rescue. The Philadelphia Eagles win all the way down the stretch, the final 3 games. So you could say this team has been in playoff mode for a month because they had no margin for error. They had to win every game, and they still needed help on the last day to get into the playoffs. Then last week, they go to Chicago, open the game up. Nick Foles, first drive, throws an interception. You go, uh-oh. No, he calms down. He has one more pick in the game, a bad one in the end zone. But they hung with the Bears long enough and avoided the old double doink off of the upright and the crossbar to advance and move on. Does the luck run out for Nick Foles here in the Big Easy?
Well, it is, why Dave talked about back-to-back road games not being a lot. But when you're on the road 5 times in 6 weeks, that takes a lot of prep time away there. I mean, it's not really the flight there. It's all the time you lose traveling back and forth. So 5 road games in 6 weeks is a big deal. And yes, Mitch Trubisky, again, a good young quarterback, but again, a young quarterback making a playoff start. Much different than Drew Brees here. I'm on WWL every week with Seth Dunlap on Wednesday nights. And I turned it around yesterday, and a lot of times we talk games, but we also learned from our radio hosts in those cities that know the players well, that know the situations. And I said to Seth, this Saints offense has averaged 299 yards per game the last 5 or 6 weeks. Should I be concerned? And he said, absolutely not. They had been without their left tackle the last 4 weeks. He is back. He is healthy. They are a completely different team with that left tackle in. He said Drew Brees will be back to where he is. I think in this game, the Foles magic does run out. I like the Saints.
And you saw this defense last week. The Bears' offense has struggled, most of the year. Mitch threw for 303 yards in that game last week, and he had some guys open that if he hits them in stride or leads them,
300 yards all underneath. Yeah, it was
that if he hits them in stride, they're touchdowns. And then of course the one play that was just ridiculous, the catch, the fumble. No. Then
picks up the ball.
The recovery was by the referee. Yeah. Okay, so it just killed. Either way, killed a big play there as well. If the Bears could have that much success moving the ball against Philadelphia, what's going to happen this week in the Superdome? Now, I'm one of those guys that I know just because you have the revenge angle, that doesn't mean it's going to get done. But that was such a whooping they took in that first meeting. I generally hate to come back with the same team in the second game, but I'm having a hard time making a case for Philadelphia, and I think this is another big candidate. And I know you talk to any bookmaker in town, they're going to tell you they're going to be tired of writing teasers this week that hook up the Saints and the Rams. The 2 big favorites that you're going to get them in situations where they just have to win. And historically, this is the round that those teams win. And it's going to be a very popular teaser for sure.
2 things to bring up. We talked about this earlier in the angle section, but I just want to remind people that, the Colts, the Chargers, and the Eagles all won as wild card dogs. Those teams that have done that have gone 8-3 since 2006, so that's a positive, but they did go 0-2 last year. The second thing I want to mention is this. Since 1981, that's 39 years, only 36 rested home division teams in this round have lost, so that's under 1 per year. So my advice is don't try to get cute with upsets of dogs. They don't happen that often in this round. Yes, you get some wild card teams that have been to the Super Bowl, but again, for the most part, you're not going to find them here.
Well, as I said, the books will need one of these teams to lose to save them on Sunday. All right, guys, that's all we could do with these 4 games. We're going to take a break. When we come back, Dave, Ralph, myself, we're all going to give you a best bet for the weekend. That's up next here on the WagerTalk Podcast. Welcome back to the WagerTalk Podcast. Before we jump into this week's best bets, I want to give you one more time a reminder on the special we've got for you this week. Hey, Ralph, Dave, and myself, we appreciate you tuning in each and every week to listen to us, and we like to give you a little something special from the three of us. You can get $10 off any package this week, and it's good all weekend long, so you can use this coupon code over and over again. Pick anything you want, $10 off. That could be a single game package. It could be a 3-day all access, 7-day all access, whatever you want. Just use coupon code POD10. That's POD10, and you get $10 off anything you want from Ralph, Dave, or myself. All right, let's go to the man behind the shades. What do you got for us for a best bet?
Yeah, the thing is that I'll preface this by saying it's likely that I won't be playing the game. I think I'm only going to have one NFL play this weekend. I only had one last week, and I won that. I've been going low volume and doing really well with it across the board. So this isn't the one game, obviously. If you want that, sorry, you got to buy it.
But you get it for half price.
Yeah. But, some people are not looking to spend money, and that's okay, too. The rest of the games, I think I'd take the Chiefs. The Colts are playing really good football, but this offense is an absolute monster, and I don't think that they can hold them at home. The crowd will be insane. They're going to make it difficult for Andrew Luck to audible at the line of scrimmage if he wants to. And there's going to be times when he wants to. I know the Chiefs' defense is completely unreliable, and that's probably why it's not on my card. But I think the Chiefs are getting near 30 again, and I don't know that Indianapolis can can maintain that pace for 60 minutes. So it's more of a lean than a play, but I'll use the Chiefs minus the points as the best bet.
And I'll give you a best bet on that same game. Andy Reid's not taking his foot off the gas this year.
You better not. Andy Reid does not have a great playoff history, and that he needs. I got to tell you something.
See a second half collapse like they
from
had
that
last
standpoint. Year. They can't lose this game, or they might have to. Seriously, that's as ridiculous as it sounds. They might have to look at saying we can't win with this guy. We can't win in the clutch with this guy because that's Philadelphia fans will say, no, you can't.
Would this be the Dusty Baker syndrome?
Something along those lines, right? But I think they get through here.
All right. Let's go to Ralph. You got a basketball game for us, a Friday night game. Big Ten Conference, what are you looking at, my man?
Yeah, Big Ten, a Friday night doubleheader on FS1, and I like Wisconsin minus the points. Wisconsin started, lower in the Big Ten projections to start the year. I think they're just a solid defensive team. Carson Edwards may be the best player in the Big Ten for Purdue, but this Wisconsin team can shut them down on defense. Wisconsin currently minus 4.5. That's that early number for that Friday night game, and that is on FS1.
All right. Going to go to me. I pretty much kind of said where I'm looking at here, where I thought there's just tremendous value. It might be the squarest play on the card, but you know what? Sometimes square wins. And this is a spot where using that two-team teaser with the Rams and with the Saints, I don't see these two teams losing. The Saints, this is a spot where I just see them winning by 14 or more. Might end up making my card as an actual play, the side on the Saints. But go back to the Rams game. This is the one that maybe I would be a little more concerned that if the Cowboys can get that running game going and get a lead, if you're playing, downhill, you can shorten the game, you can continue to run. But what happens to the Cowboys if the Rams offense gets that quick 10 to 14 points, gets that lead? Can Dak Prescott go toe-to-toe with this offense? I don't think he can. That puts me on the Rams to get their win at home. Also like the fact when you got a team that lost their one and done last year, especially when they were one of the favorites going in, had the bye week and everything else. Those teams, when they get the chance the next year, they generally make up for the loss. I'll go ahead, take the two-team teaser, tease the Saints down, tease the Rams down, put them both in the position just to win the ball games. And that is my best bet for this week's podcast. Guys, I want to thank our guest tonight, William Bernanke from CG Analytics. Always love him coming on the show. Big thanks to Ralph and Dave for joining me in studio. Also, big shout out to our man in Detroit, Johnny Detroit. He gets the podcast up and available to everybody so you can hear. Our producer, Mark Seidel, gets the podcast to you guys. Make sure that us guys sound good. And, of course, you, the listeners. This wouldn't be a podcast without you guys. We really appreciate you guys tuning in each week, leaving comments. We do this for you guys, and you make it fun for us. We enjoy doing it. And I'm your host, Marco D'Angelo. Till next week, let's cash some tickets.